Piscama, Ishmisha Lindsey Britton, Kia ora, ko Lindsey Britton tōku ingoa. Hi everyone, it's Lindsey Britton here from Turas, and welcome to the second Time to Thrive live event about thriving through redundancy and how to bounce forward. Today we're going to talk about 3 tips on how to take stock and avoid rash action that you may regret, and how to create a plan to move forward. So let's dive in. I found in my own experience with 6 restructures and 3 redundancies that often the anxiety led me to jump to the worst case scenario, and it was going to happen tomorrow. So the timeline was very much here. What that led me to do was feel tempted to take rash action now. And that can be dangerous because in my case, for example, I rushed out to look into the job market to see what jobs there were out there and applied and went forward. And actually, that was not necessarily my best interest, because in reality, it probably wasn't the job that I wanted. And it was sort of jumping from the frying pan into the fire, because ultimately it wasn't necessarily the action that I needed to take, despite the fact that it felt like it was feeding my feeling of certainty and stability. So let's talk about the first tip. How do we take stock? The first thing I want to say is understand how real your fear is by plotting an actual timeline. Now, I realise that some of you are going to be in different parts of your journey at the moment, so I'm going to make the assumption that most of you are probably either pre-EOI or in the EOI at the moment. But what I would like to suggest is that you plot a real timeline with the following key milestones. Firstly, when does the EOI start and finish? If I'm successful, when does the recruitment start and finish? If the scenario is that I'm not successful, when does the redeployment discussion start and potentially finish? And then ultimately, if this scenario is that you're not successful, then when is it likely I'm going to be formally notified that I'm going to be made redundant? What is my notice period for that? And what is the time frame for my redundancy package? Once you plot all that out, then the next question you want to ask yourself was, how long can I survive financially? And what you want to look at is obviously your essential expenses and how much you might have for an emergency sort of management fund to keep you going as a family until you find what your next role is. And if you do that, that's, in great project management terms, that is creating your critical path. And you can see where in your absolute D-Day is in terms of financially being in another role or deciding what you're doing next. I find that with many clients I've done this with, the sheer sense of relief they get when they realize the timeline is longer than what they thought. So if you do this, I can promise you it will reduce your level of anxiety. It will clear your head because of all the noise that's going on in it around the questions you don't know the answer to. And thirdly, it will help you take control of what you can. And when you feel more in control, you feel calmer. Once you've done that timeline, my advice to you is stick it somewhere where you can see it. The reason I say that is with any change journey, it's often up and down and it's quite volatile. So whilst you might have created that timeline and it feels great on one day, you can guarantee that there's going to be another day when this will pop up. So when that fear pops up again, look at that timeline. It will help reduce that anxiety and help you feel more in control. Okay, so that's the first tip. The second tip is lighten your load. Decide what the real outcome is that you want. And this is quite a hard question, but one that I think is really important. What do you want the rest of your career journey to look like? And in order to help you with that, answer that question, I'd suggest you ask yourself 4 things. The first one is, what are you most passionate about solving? What's the problem you're most passionate about solving, and for whom? What organizations share your passion, and what do you admire about them? That's the second question. The third question is, which talents and skills do I enjoy the most? And your final question is, do my values align with my current organization, or have we grown apart? And this question is really critical. And I've learned from experience that this is probably the most important question. Because if all organizations have a journey and you have a journey, and sometimes you're going on separate paths and your values don't align anymore, that's not a bad thing. But it does mean that if you get into that situation, it's like a square peg in a round hole. And if you stay on in an organization where that has occurred, then over time, the actions of that organization might jar with your values, and that results in you feeling cross, upset, frustrated, resentful. And that's not really a win-win for either of you. So really dig deep and think hard when you're answering this particular question. So once you've done those questions, you'll have a clearer sense of where your journey is and where you want to head. You'll be able to answer, well, do I want to stay? Do I want to look at a new position in my current organization, or am I at a crossroads in my journey where I may need to consider actually looking elsewhere and going elsewhere for both myself and for the benefit of the organization? When you've answered those questions, the next thing you want to answer is, okay, I've made this decision, which can be a hard one, but having made this decision, you'll have a much clearer plan because of two things. One is it'll have taken the noise out of your head around any unwanted outcomes that you have, and it will inform your plan because you'll have a much clearer laser-like focus of where you want to head and what you're going to do. And if the result of all those thinking and all those questions lead you to go, well, actually, the likelihood is that I'm going to be made redundant and I'm going to leave my organization, then the next part of your plan needs to be about what's my job search strategy? Given the 4 questions I asked myself about my career journey, what am I actually looking for now? And who in my network would be good to connect with to support that job search? Who in my recruitment agency world is going to help me support that job search? And the second question you want to ask yourself is, having asked yourself what are the talents and skills you enjoy the most, is there a skill gap there that you want to focus on to get yourself match fit? And what are the opportunities in terms of training and skills development that you can take up? So that is your second tip. So you've taken stock, you've plotted your actual timeline, you know your critical path, you've actually decided what your outcome is going to be in your own mind, you've cleared your head. The next tip I want to share with you, the third tip, is about expanding your circle. And that's because it's often the who, that will open the door to new opportunities, not necessarily the what. And secondly, if you're trying to work out where you're heading next and how to get there, you need to understand the context and the environment that will help you solve that problem, because you can't solve a problem in a vacuum. So reach out to your professional networks, go to professional events, find out what's happening on the ground, find out where the opportunities might be, and keep a document with all of those in them. Almost create yourself a job search CRM where you've got your contacts, what you last talked about, what the opportunities are, what your next follow-up is. I find that really useful in my own business, because when you're growing so many different conversations, it's so easy to lose track. So a simple Excel document can help you just stay on track in terms of those relationships and what your next step is. When you go to these professional events or reach out to your professional network, remember it's not about sympathy. Because while sympathy is really useful and it's nice, so don't get me wrong, sympathy is good, but it won't necessarily help you solve the problem or take action. It will just make you feel supported. What you're actually wanting to do is understand your context and environment, share the problem with people in the know, and look to agree actions to move forward. And most importantly, I've found it's about being vulnerable and letting people know where you really are at and how you're feeling. And that's really hard, particularly if you go out on LinkedIn or any other social network. You want to portray the fact that you're in control and everything's good. But what I found in my 6 restructures and 3 redundancies is that I've been blown away every time by the huge generosity of human spirit. If people can help you, they will, but they need to know where you're at and know about the problems that you're facing. So I really encourage you to be bold and honest. I've had to do that on many times throughout my change agent journey, and I've never ever regretted it. I have to be honest. So let's just recap today. Today was about how to how to take stock and avoid rash action that you might regret and create a bit of a plan to give you a clearer head, put you back in the driver's seat and really understand where you want to head. The 3 tips that we talked about was 1, understand how real your fear is by plotting your real timeline and the different scenarios that go with that, including the financial one. 2, lighten your load. Decide what the real outcome is that you want. And 3, expand your circle. Understand the context within which your problem is sitting and how you can solve it, and where the doors might be to new opportunities. I hope that's been really useful. Next week, we're going to talk about, okay, so you've got your plan. So how are you going to get out there? How are you going to rebuild your confidence and your sense of self and who you want to portray for where you're heading by being more socially resilient? If you're really interested in keeping in touch, then go and join my Time to Thrive Facebook group. It'll tell you when the events are coming up, and also there's ongoing posts around this topic. It's your journey. Travel it well with Turas. Kia kaha.